All right. Hello and welcome to ChooseFI. Today on the show, we have a real treat. So we have a blast from the past. This should be fantastic. So Scott Rickens, for longtime listeners, got in touch with us back at the very beginning of ChooseFI. So in early to mid 2017, after he had just found the FI community through Mr. Money Mustache on the Tim Ferriss show. And it was like a bolt of lightning for him. And he actually decided to embark on a journey with his wife, Taylor, to really try out this world, try out this life of FI, and record it for posterity in a documentary that became Playing with Fire. So this is actually the update because interestingly, when Scott was on our show for the first time in episode 37, he talked about this being a long-term journey of 10 years or more. And we are 5+ years in. So it's that perfect middle point that some people like to refer to as the doldrums, right? Like what happens after you've made all the changes and you're still on that path. So this should be amazing to hear an update on their lives and to see where they are. So with that, welcome to ChooseFI.
You're listening to ChooseFI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. ChooseFI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, Scott and Taylor, welcome back to ChooseFI. And Taylor, welcome for the first time, which is insane to me because I would have bet you were on the show at least twice, and this is your very first time. So I'm so happy to have you guys here. This is, I feel like you're good friends, and we've become good friends through the filming. And yeah, it's just good to see your faces and hear your voices.
No doubt. We feel the same way, bud. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having us.
I only took it personal for a few years, Brad, that I wasn't on,
Oh, Taylor, I'm so sorry. I would have bet anything that you were on the show.
I'm kidding.
I know. But the funny thing is we talk about you a lot. So we talk about, well, both of you, of course, and what Scott did with the movie and what you guys did for the community, clearly. But that first list that Scott talked about, right? When he said, I had a stroke of clarity. It was maybe like the singular moment of genius in Scott's life, and of which there have been many, but this might be the singular. And it was list 10 things that make you happy on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was brilliant. I love, because Taylor, you haven't had a chance to explain that here on the show. Like, talk me through those early days, because I mean, Scott comes to you all wacky and crazy. Hey, I found this life. We've got to change everything. But then he asks this incredibly interesting question about this list.
Yeah. Well, if anyone knows Scott, they know that he is very good at wild ideas. And we always call him the idea man in this house because he is the first to share something that is just incredible and amazing and throw it at you and see how you do with it. And so when we were laying in bed, I'll never forget, we were just, about to go to sleep in our little place in Coronado. And I was just as happy as could be. We had a baby at the time who was about 9 months, well, maybe about a year old at that stage. And he looked at me and he said, I found this crazy thing and I think we should pick up our life and move and really like hone in and save all this money and then we can just retire. And I was like, okay, like that sounds great. I didn't think much of it. And fast forward a few months, we picked up our entire life and decided to move and really have a journey on this thing called FI at the time. And for me, one of the things he really asked me when we were deciding to move was, hey, what makes you the most happy? What are 10 things that make you the most happy on a daily basis? And when I actually looked at the list and wrote it down, it was things like, obviously, my baby, but, a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of wine, mostly outdoor stuff, walking, running, hanging out with my family and friends. And he said, hey, just an FYI, you could do that anywhere, right? We don't have to live in this super expensive beach community. So it was a pretty aha moment for me at the time when I said, we're never leaving San Diego in general. This is my home. I never want to leave. And it was pretty big. It was pretty powerful.
Yeah. And it was also like an affirmation for me, a reaffirmation that we were really on the same page. And so we could take this journey together because we realized that like our happiness lists were so similar. And that's why I just love this exercise so much. And I talk about it a lot when I'm on podcasts and whatnot. And I found that idea in a book called The Happiness Advantage, I want to say it is. And I hadn't thought about, doing that prior because it was sort of when I was reading The Happiness Advantage, I was thinking about it for myself. So when we were going through this idea of starting a journey to FI, it just kind of dawned on me that I could use that list where we can use it together and really align ourselves, because that's what I was learning, was that it's all about alignment. It's alignment with your own values, like align your spending with your values, right? And so it made common sense, really. But it was a way to kind of open Taylor's eyes to the possibilities and the reasons, the why behind FI, as you guys say. And I think that was really the catalyst, because one thing that Taylor kind of breezed over is she wasn't really interested in leaving the little beach community. So
well, who would, right?
Right.
Yeah, and who would? Totally.
But also, I think one of the biggest points there was that he made me realize that my list didn't require money. There wasn't a lot on my list. I said wine, and I just said it had to be alcoholic, not expensive. I said wine on the list. But I feel like everything else was free. Everything else on that list had no relation to money. So I think that was really the catalyst for us kicking that off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I mean, to me, that's the sign of a happy life, that you don't need these external things. And like Scott's saying, he's talking about aligning spending with values, but it's really an affirmation of your alignment as a couple, which is beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's what was so special about all of this. When I look back, reflecting on, as you said, over 5 years, it's unbelievable to me. I can't believe we're saying that we've been buds that long. And this is like oh my gosh, like all those memories come flooding back. It's crazy. But the most interesting thing about this journey was that we started out thinking that it was about money, and turns out it had almost nothing to do with money. It was about our life and our values and what we cared about and all those types of things. And we just opened our eyes to so much more in life after discovering this. It was like ripping the Band-Aid off, like taking off the blinders, and suddenly you could kind of see. It was like taking the red pill, suddenly the matrix presents itself. And that really allowed us to take a hard stock at where our life was going and where we wanted it to go, and then make those incremental choices that would have massive impacts down the road, and do them intentionally. And we had never really made intentional decisions for ourselves up to that point, other than we really like when we go on vacation, why don't we live in a place where people vacation? Like that was about as intentional as we got. And, that turned us into these living paycheck to paycheck hamsters. And so, yeah, it was, I think the word we often think about is just liberated. We were liberated from that hamster wheel. And we're just really grateful.
Yeah. And like you're saying, like in essence, how can you think about where we're going or where we want to go, what trajectory we're on when you are living paycheck to paycheck just to live in this expensive place?
Exactly.
All the while, that actually not being one of these 10 things, or not even close to one of these 10 things that actually make you happy on a day-to-day basis. So yet, why are we sleepwalking through this? And I think that's, it's hard. And I had the same issue with my family and friends. I mean, I had a couple of friends. So I grew up on Long Island, New York, high cost of living area, certainly not like Coronado quite, but pretty high cost of living. And it just is that this is how we've always done it, right? Like that for so many people, it's, oh, my family and friends are here. I could never leave. Or maybe it doesn't even get to that point of thinking. But yet, maybe if they had that stroke of clarity and they asked that question, it would open it up, because as you said, it has almost nothing to do with money. Like your day-to-day happiness has very little to do with that. And I think a lot of us use it as this, like, I don't know, this ointment almost, this way to like cure ourselves, like because we don't have that pure contentment. So it sounds as if, even though you were in this high cost of living area, it sounds as if you were aligned. But have you seen an evolution in your own alignment as a couple as you've moved further along this path to FI? Like, talk me through like that evolution. And I don't imagine it's just been a super straight line, like everything's wonderful every day. I'm not implying that, but like, talk me through like, that whole evolution of you guys, of money, of these changes, because that's the real stuff that I think people who haven't made these changes are so curious about.
Yeah, I'll let Taylor take that. One thing I've been wanting to take the opportunity to clarify is the whole Coronado thing. My dad was in the Navy, and I was born in San Diego, and I had lived there multiple times in my life, and so had my parents. And so we did have kind of an established community there. It wasn't just, we're going to just, go blindfold, throw a dart at a map and see what happens. So, just like when you grew up on Long Island, I'm sure it wasn't as expensive then as it is now, right? And with Coronado, that's what it was. It was a sleepy Navy town. But by the time we had moved there and spent 5 or 6 years there, it had started to become something completely different. So, we were feeling the effects of the changes of Coronado as well. It wasn't just that we were living in a high cost of living area and then decided to move to a lower cost of living area. It was a lot of things about this place doesn't necessarily align with our long-term goals. So let's look at maybe leaving. And just to clarify that, it wasn't as simple as we're living in a high cost of living area because we weren't thinking through it. And now we want to undo that,
But no, I think that word alignment is important, right? It's just the awareness. That's another critical word. Is like most of us just simply aren't aware, right?
Correct.
So maybe this introduction to FI made you have that level of awareness that, okay, maybe we've seen these changes in Coronado and we might have otherwise just said, oh, but this is where we live. So that actually to me bolsters the cause. I think that's even better than if it was just, oh, we moved because it was high cost of living, simple, end of story. This was, hey, we've seen changes in this place we love. Here's yet another almost equally as important reason. So yeah, that's interesting.
And I would even double down on that line of thinking, Brad, and say that I was actually aware of it for a few years before we left, but I didn't have a solution. And it felt like FI was sort of like the eye-opening solution because it was, I don't know why I would want to leave. I can't present a compelling argument to my wife about why we would want to leave, and then for all of it to come through and all of a sudden it was like, well, this is about our future. This is about our daughter's future. This is about how we want to live. And if we want to align our values with our spending, that all of a sudden makes sense. And so it gave us that reason and that impetus for leaving, that catalyst. So, which I think it can do no matter what your living situation is. If you can't live, if you're living in a low cost of living area and you find this wonderful, if you're living in a high cost of living area, you don't necessarily have to leave. It's not about that. It was just, oh, now I have a reason to make changes that are going to benefit me, benefit us. So just to clarify, I think that it's just that, yeah. But to get back to your question about aligning with our relationship and the ups and downs of that through this journey.
The evolution of us.
The minor topic of.
Yeah. I think that this journey has been incredible for our marriage and for our family. I think we went through so much early on in the journey because we were being filmed. We were traveling around the country at the time with an 18-month-old. There was so much there besides just the FI journey that you can't expect as a couple. And I think we did it together and in a place of love and in a place of learning. That was always our root, was how can we learn to be better for each other? How can we learn to align our lives the way we envision this for our daughter? I think we did it with a lot of therapy, to be honest, Brad. I think there's been, a lot of just really understanding each other and getting in tune with ourselves during this process and what made each other happy. And so I think just really moving through that was incredible. And I think we are in an amazing spot. We are incredibly lucky and blessed to be in a situation now where money isn't a part of our daily conversations. It's not a part of our, topic. And it's because we set some really great pieces in play early on.
Yeah, I would say with the whole therapy thing, one, we're huge advocates of it.
Absolutely.
It's, learning new tools to communicate, learning new tools to participate in the relationship, all those things. It's amazing. And that's what I love about Taylor is I remember early on, one of the reasons why I was like, oh, I might want to marry this girl is, she was open to changing her mind. She was open to learning new things. And those are huge character traits for me. And I feel like I'm that way. And therapy has definitely done a lot for us in learning and growing and maturing in our relationship. But, that said, to Taylor's point, I bit off more than I could chew in a lot of ways with that project and FI all happening at once. it's already one of the most stressful things in the world to move, but to move and to drastically alter the way you live and spend and think about the world while also moving to a new place and trying to establish a new community and meeting new people, while also trying to promote this project that had taken, years to develop and create, which was an incredible opportunity, one that I would never, trade in for a million years, and all the amazing relationships and places that we went and hopefully people that we helped along the way. It was such an opportunity. It was incredible. It was one of the best things I'll ever do in my life, probably. And I love that. But, you hear this often, I think, with entrepreneurs in general, like, if I knew how hard it was going to be, I'm glad I didn't know how hard it was going to be, because I probably wouldn't have done it, that kind of thing. Like, that's definitely where I landed, where it was like, oh man, this was taxing on our family. This was taxing on our psyche. This was more than we could really choose. So, I think that's probably a big part of why we've really stepped back from all of it. We made this content and it still lives out there and it can still be helpful. And from time to time, it's fun to reconnect with old friends. And, for people that are interested in little updates, that's awesome. We feel really, really grateful about that. But yeah, stepping back from that was also healthy for us, because we got really in the weeds. And it was really interesting when COVID hit. It was kind of all in the middle of we were in the thick of it. I was in the thick of it because, the movie released digitally in November and then COVID hit in March. So I was right in the thick of promoting it and trying to meet as many media people as I could and, get it out there. And then the world shut down and everything changed. Even the math seemed to change for a minute, where I was like, I don't know what's going to happen in the new world order. And I remember, I'll never forget going for a walk, which was also like nerve-wracking in the early days. Remember that? Like, can you even go for a walk?
Literally leave your house. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you leave your house? Can you pass another human on a sidewalk? But I remember we're fortunate. We live very close to some very remote wilderness. And so, we were able to get outdoors pretty quick. And I remember walking and listening to you guys. I turned to you to understand in any way, shape, or form, what the hell is going on here and how do we respond and how do we act? And I didn't know. And I think that was another piece of it is, I never represented myself as an expert, never thought of myself as an expert with money. And the whole reason why I got so excited about this whole thing is because I felt like it gave me that superpower to understand money and where we were going with it and have that confidence and that trust in the plan, which makes it so much easier. And so that was so amazing. And then all of a sudden it felt like the rug got pulled out, right? And all of a sudden I didn't know, I didn't trust. And so why would I be out talking about this stuff when I'm not even sure what's going to happen? Obviously hindsight, now we can look back and see, but I remember you talking about, well, here's the definition of a recession, y'all. and right. I remember hearing that and thinking like, yeah, where are we heading? And I think we're all so fortunate that we didn't have to experience, something as drastic as what felt like it could have been. But then from a health perspective, obviously, that was the focus. That was actually what mattered the most. And that was kind of eye-opening too. It was like almost refreshing to get out of that money mindset and back into, what's really important here. It's really family, health, and that kind of thing. So it was a nice eye-opener. And I think we've really doubled down on, well, A, we were trying to survive. And then B, once we kind of felt like we were in that mode and figured all that out, it was, what's most important to us. And it's community and it's family. And how do we work on that? And that's what we've been doing a lot of work around lately.
Yeah, that was, obviously the 36 months, essentially, right? The craziest 36 months of your guys' lives, bookended by the Tim Ferriss podcast. And I guess, as you're saying, like COVID kind of put not an end, but like a natural stopping point to, hey, we can't go out and meet people and try to get the movie seen even more, right? So, that's fascinating. Yeah, it was probably almost 36 months to the day, maybe 37.
And we spent a year filming almost. Mm-hmm. And then after we filmed, and that was while we traveled and filmed, and then we spent 9 months after traveling the country to promote it. Yeah. So it was really, just from a physical standpoint, being away and being not settled and still raising a baby and just trying to do life. It was, like Scott said, really taxing on us emotionally and physically. So
100%. Yeah, I kind of got to a point where I was almost having a bit of a breakdown because I was traveling. We were traveling obviously for the film and filming and doing all that, and I was executive producing that film. And Travis, our amazing director and friend, Travis Shakespeare, was directing, and we had this amazing team. Matt and Sam on the editing side, and the Only Today crew with all the filming and everything. it was a lot to manage. And then we got into editing, and that's where the magic is. I mean, that's actually where all the hard work begins, and creating and crafting that story in a way that we thought would help the masses and bringing it to trusted partners like yourselves to get feedback. That was all very stressful. And at the end of all of that, now you think you're done. And again, no, you're just starting again. You got to go back on the road and you got to promote this thing. And okay, well, I want to give this my best shot. So all of a sudden we're going to 20 different cities around the country doing in-person presentations, trying to coordinate not only the theaters and the ticket sales, but then also trying to get cast members to show up to do, Q&As afterwards, which was incredible. It was like some of the best memories of my life. And like the big blowout in Richmond was incredible. And I met amazing people there that I still know, like Brad Finn and like, our collective friend Brad and some other people I'd never even met before. And like, that just happened over and over and over again. It was incredible. And we were invited to Chautauqua. We were going to Portugal, and we've been to Ecuador. And like, this project has literally taken us around the world. But by the end of it, I was on like the brink of a mental breakdown because I was physically and emotionally exhausted. And Brad, you and I had connected about this quite a bit, where my shoulders were so clenched. I had these huge knots in my shoulders. I couldn't move. And I was going to acupuncture and chiropractic services, just trying to work this stuff out. And I know you were feeling similarly when you were just getting into CrossFit, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep, exactly. And it's still something I'm struggling with. So it's, it's interesting. And I obviously want to commend you guys for talking about therapy, because I think it's so important. And sadly, even today, it's still, people aren't as forthcoming about it as they otherwise might be or should be, really. And it's very normal. I know I'm in a mastermind group with Dominic Cortuccio, who we've had on the podcast numerous times.
We know him.
Yeah, you certainly know that. And I think 18 of the 20 of us in the group have been to therapy at some point in our lives. And these are all like, quote unquote, high performing people and all that, yada, yada, yada. But that actually, I think, again, bolsters the case. It's like, it's so important. And sadly, people don't talk about it. And as we're saying here, like, FI is so wonderful in so many ways. But I think actually one of the interesting aspects of it is because you aren't sleepwalking anymore. You're not just going through the motions. You have that extra space to look at your life. And sometimes you have to say, like, I don't know what I want. Like, I actually don't know what lights me up because I've been sleepwalking, right? So it's this wonderful thing, but it's a paradox in a sense of like, okay, now I really need to do some introspection, both on myself and relationships, all of these things. And it's really critical.
Yeah. And something else we learned, I think, during this time, and I think we were really lucky in a lot of capacities finding a great therapist. I also think seeing a therapist when things are good. A lot of people think, oh, you have to see a therapist when things are really bad and not going well. For us, it was this journey of 5 years where there were ups and downs. Sometimes there were really great, months where we didn't feel like we needed to talk to someone, but we did anyway. And we kept that relationship going. And I think that really helped us through the good times and the bad, and really be able to look at our life and our relationship and be able to make it the most.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm curious, so kind of like a little blaster in the past again is that list, that list of 10 things. Have you guys ever, because this is what you've become so known for and in such a wonderful way, like, is that something you revisit? Not because you're known for it, obviously, but just because it's important. Like, have you revisited that list?
Yes. I think we have built our life and bend around that list, which is incredible. And we knew we wanted freedom. We knew we wanted to be able to be with our community and our family. And in the last 5 years, we were able to buy a rental, an Airbnb rental, move into it, fix it up, live in it for 2 years, and then move to a new location. And so now we have an asset that we would have never been able to do without all of this. And in the next move that we made, which was in the last year, we decided to move next to 3 of our closest best friends. And so we all live on a similar block. And so all of our kids can be together and we can be together. And in the last 3 years, we've convinced both sets of our parents to move here. So we really have been intentional about our life and about what is making us happy. And so creating that lifestyle is really important.
And you set a good example, Brad. I mean, I remember the day we filmed you taking your kids out to the bus stop and coming home afterwards and playing board games together.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that. And it's just like setting such a good example for what life can be and should be, for everyone. I wish everyone could have that. Whether you're starting from, let's say, negative to starting in a good spot and just needing to realign. I mean, I think you guys say this often, and I can't stop thinking about it. It's just a math problem. It's all math. And so you can't argue with the math. But where there is a lot of gray area is all of the rest of it, the emotional side, the emotional journey, where people are starting from, all those things. That is really, the personal side of personal finance. And for us, like, I don't want to just paint this rosy picture where every single thing is awesome now because we found FI. That's not in any way, shape, or form what happened. I remember when we first found it, yes, I was excited. Yes, I brought these ideas home and I was trying to essentially convince Taylor to come along with me on this journey and all that. But there was absolutely still massive amounts of doubt in my head of like, could this really work for us? Is this really going to work this way? And will we have the patience to keep it up? And that doubt still pervades sometimes. And, there's times where we do lose track of our budget in a bad way, like we used to. And then you have to deal with those feelings of guilt and shame and like whatever else that comes up. And then we'll have issues where we're still not 100% perfect about talking about it, But at the same time, if I reflect back, we're way better at talking about it than we used to be. And we both do have aligned values and goals. And so ultimately, even if it can get heated from time to time because we're not seeing eye to eye or we're miscommunicating, whatever it is, I think ultimately that conversation, as long as we keep going with it, it always lands on, wait, we are on the same page. Okay, or maybe I did this wrong, or I shouldn't have approached you this way, or I shouldn't have thought of it this way, or I need to respect the way you're thinking about this now. And those are the adjustments that have really made it a real journey and not just some math problem, and looking back at the car situation, it's like, like Taylor got this Honda and she can't stand it. And every day she'd walk out.
The post BMW car?
Yeah. The post BMW blues. Yeah. Like she would just look at it and just be like, I can't stand this thing. And I hate it. And personally, I loved it. I thought that car was the best car I probably have ever owned. It had so much cargo space and it was so comfortable. It was like a big captain's chair to drive. And I was so proud of the high miles and how efficient and reliable this thing was. And I hated getting rid of it. But, Taylor just hated it. And, we got lucky. And this is another funny, like little side effect of FI is a lot of our friends and family obviously know about our journey. So we've had little instances like this come up where like a friend will be like, hey, I know you're into FI. I've got this car I'm about to sell. Like, I don't really want to go through all the rigmarole. Like, yeah, do you want it? I'll get it. And so that literally happened where they were trading this older car in for a nice newer car. And they didn't want to go through the rigmarole of selling it privately. And they weren't buying it from a dealer. So they didn't have a trade-in option. They're like, oh, we'll just give it to you for trade-in. And it was just like, well, that's almost a no-brainer because now I'm getting, even more miles for a couple more $1,000. Like I'm all in on that. And if it's going to make Taylor happier, that's great. So, so we upgraded that, but we still stuck with one car and we still paid cash for that car. And we did not, we still kept it under
I think we kept it under 10,000.
Brandon, I think, told us we had to keep it under 6,000, but we just said, no, thank you. We need more reliability than that. And we really do live in a gnarly climate where we can get, 3 feet of snow overnight, so we need to have, there are considerations here.
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of stuff it's so like, obviously I appreciate Brandon's advice and you're talking about in the movie, right? So, but I think as we've all evolved and it's so important, right? Like there has been an evolution of the FI movement.
Yes.
From this, it's all about cutting to the bone and just getting there as fast as you can, whether that was true or not, or just a caricature. Clearly that was the sentiment. And I think it's important. And that's what's so beautiful about a conversation like this, just in general, is like, this is real. Real life intervenes and it intersects with what's the perfect on paper. Because at the end of the day, like, I don't care about the perfect on paper. I care about what makes me happy, what makes my wife happy, what helps me sleep well at night in a lot of cases. And if you guys are worried about 3 feet of snow falling in Bend and you're kind of unreliable, or, Scott would say perfectly reliable, but Taylor would not, right? Like, well, then get a more expensive car. It's fine as long as you're doing it intentionally and you're not just doing it because that's what success looks like, right? Like getting a X car, a BMW or whatever, fill in the blank. But if you love a BMW and you can afford it, right? And it doesn't hinder your goals, well, that's fine too, in my opinion. And guys, I have to say, like, I don't think that's where I would have been 6 years ago. I don't think I would have been as open-minded as I am today. And I think that's pretty cool to look back and say, like, there's no dogma here. There's no like right or wrong answer. There's a right or wrong answer for you.
Yeah.
Like, That's beautiful, right?
That gives me goosebumps, honestly, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. I felt the same way. Like when I got into the movement or the community, there were these underlying sort of tenets that almost felt like you had to sort of follow them to really be able to say that you were, I guess, following this path.
Card-carrying member of the FI community.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, like the whole COVID thing and, just like the break, it allowed me specifically to really take a step back from that whole thing because I had bought in hook, line, and sinker. I had to create a sort of a new identity for myself to be able to promote this project, to be a part of that situation. And like, it wasn't fake by any means, but people can be impressionable. I was impressionable. Of course I was. I loved this thing that I found. And it doesn't take away from the fact that I still love this thing that I found. And this community is incredible. And like, everyone's trying to do their best, it feels like. But, of course, there's always like bad actors. There's things that don't always go perfect. I mean, the fire police or whatever, like that kind of stuff, that kind of stuff was always such a joke to me. And like, I remember multiple times realizing very early on, like the retire early part doesn't matter to us as much. Now that we're on the other side of this, now that we're on the right track and we feel good about, our financial future. Okay, the retire early thing, Taylor quickly realized that's not necessarily
our personalities
or what we're really driving towards. It's not that we despise work. We got caught up in a really interesting time where we had a brand new baby and we're staring down the barrel of going back to work with a brand new baby sitting at home. That's difficult. That is an incredibly difficult time. And now we're getting into like all kinds of things. Like this is one of those countries that doesn't have, maternity and paternity leave like it should and all that kind of stuff, because that is a time where you should be with babies and be at home and all that. But
now we have a first grader and we have 7 hours a day that we're like, so what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe retiring isn't really the answer right now.
We have too much time.
Yeah. But, you can't name the film Playing with Fi because no one,
Right,
there's no context. Right. It's like, what are you talking about? And I really do still believe that the retire early part is a good hook. It's a good hook to get people interested in the first place. The people that really need to be interested, right? Which is usually you're in a rut at work. You don't know how to get out and you haven't really thought about this particular path. And this is the path that we're saying, hey, look, leaps and bounds, this is better than the path you're on, the proverbial hamster wheel.
I also, Brad, there were times where I'll never forget the one in particular, when we were trying to come into our own, because remember, the whole idea was we were playing with this idea. We didn't know if we were going to be good at it or bad at it or stick with it. But it became, especially when we went on tour, that we were expected to live like that all the time and live very frugally, I think was a feeling that we both felt a lot of pressure on. And I remember we went to sushi one night and a fan ran into us and saw us there.
Oh, wow.
And we both felt so guilty that we were out to sushi. Like we felt terrible about it when we left there. And we both just kind of had to come to a moment where we thought to ourselves, hey, we used to do this every night of the week and now we're not. And that's okay. And we can afford to be here. And it's still all right to go do the things that bring you joy in capacities like that. And we don't need to feel bad about it. But that was a hard adjustment for us coming out of the film and the persona of who we were supposed to be. And I think to Scott's point, really just taking a step back from that out of the public light for us was mentally stabling.
And to be clear, that is a ridiculous thing to feel because we don't owe anybody any explanation and we can obviously go to enjoy a nice dinner whenever we want. That's not even a question. And I don't think anybody's actually holding that, against us or towards us or anything like that.
But it was an internal feeling that you had, whether
Correct.
right or wrong. Yeah, it's irrelevant.
Whether right or wrong, exactly.
I listen to a lot of podcasts. The Tim Ferriss Show has always been my favorite by far. But for the first time ever, there's a real rival for that top spot. It's a show called My First Million. When I see a new episode show up in my podcast player, it's a drop everything and listen kind of situation for me. The show is all about business building and growth hacking, from how to make $1,000 in a weekend type side hustles to billion-dollar ideas and everything in between. The show is fun. It's infectious. The hosts, Sam Parr and Sean Perry, have an amazing rapport. In fact, if you're a longtime ChooseFI fan, I think you'll find it's the closest thing to me and Jonathan you've ever heard. And Sam and Sean are legit. They've built and sold 8-figure businesses to HubSpot and Amazon, and they have an amazing network of friends and colleagues they get on the show to share their wisdom. If I lost everything and had to start over from scratch, I can honestly say the first place I'd start is with My First Million. I think the mindset of business building they cultivate is unmatched, so I'd seriously just listen to every episode in their feed and go from there. The show is a little bit of an acquired taste, but as you get to know Sam and Sean, you'll see just how brilliant they are. So take my word for it and listen to at least a handful of episodes. I think you'll love it. So search for My First Million. That's My First Million on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's interesting. Like, I think what's more kind of applicable for maybe for the audience, right, is like, I don't think it's bad at the beginning, personally, to find that point of frugality. I actually don't. Like, I think that's a very viable strategy because I think it's kind of like a means to an end of like getting you on this path. But then you very quickly realize like, this is not the end goal.
Totally.
Depriving yourself and then just sprinting, quote unquote, to some, however long that takes, 5, 10, 15, whatever the quote unquote sprint would be. Like, you can't wish away your life, right? Like, quite literally, it's not a dress rehearsal. We only get 80, 90, 100 years if we're super lucky. So to wish away any period of that because you think life is going to be great when you get to this number on a sheet of paper or on a computer screen. Like, I'm here to tell everybody, and you guys are too, like, that does not make you happy. It simply doesn't.
Goodness gracious, no.
No.
And there's like the analogy of the marathon is just so perfect for this, right? Where if FI is the marathon, I agree, Brad. You know, I'm glad that we took it to the extreme. We took it to the edge of our capability. I think at one point we hit like a 78% savings rate. We were miserable, but we did it.
Right.
And we did it so we knew that that was not for us. And if we had never done that, like maybe we were hitting in the 30 or 40 range. And what if we could have hit 50 comfortably? We just didn't know it because we never tried. Like, you don't push yourself. And so like, you know, in the marathon, if you don't push yourself on some of those middle miles, how are you ever going to know what your PR is going to be, right? But at the same time, if you come out sprinting, you're going to lose the marathon, bud. That's all there is to it, right? Like you've got to pace yourself. And so I really think that was the lesson. And, you know, whether we learned it the hard way or the easy way, like, I don't want to get into that too much, but like, you know, it's not like woe is us or anything, but we could have done things better. We didn't do this perfectly. That's okay.
But I mean, listen, you used a word before that I really wanted to come back to because I think it's important is we made adjustments, you said. And that is so critical. Like, and I think that again is something that people can really take away from the story here because this is applicable to everybody because people do beat themselves up. Like, oh, I got off track. Like you were saying, like we're off track for a month and like with our budget and this and that. And like, it's never going to be totally rosy. Like that, if you set that up as like the only way you're going to measure success, I can tell you for certain you're going to fail. Absolutely for certain. So that can't be the bar for success. I think what you guys have done is obviously you wouldn't have done it exactly with the move and the movie. I mean,
yeah,
this is a one-person case study, right? Like, so
yeah. Don't move, do a movie and do a book at the same time. We don't recommend that.
Aren't you happy you tuned into ChooseFI to learn that information?
Yeah, seriously. So duly noted for the Rickins family. We got it. But the key is that you can make adjustments. We can all make adjustments. And, you know, I'd love to hear you guys talk through that, like, because you've made a bunch of adjustments, undoubtedly, and it's not over. Right? Like to imagine that as we're recording this in September of 2022, that you've made every adjustment you're ever going to make. Like that's ridiculous. It's obviously not true.
No, totally. I mean, I know early on, again, getting into the dogma side, there were these tenets of how to manage your money, how to understand how to manage your money. And I sunk into those hook, line, and sinker because I had to. We had to get there. And we did. And I'm glad we did. One of those tenets being figure out what your savings rate is. Figure out how much you have left over at the end of the month. Try to get that to 50% or more if you can. You know, that all those things. Adjustments wise, we no longer track that. I don't want to track on a monthly basis where our savings rate is. I don't need to do that because it doesn't really serve us. What we did do was we set up all kinds of adjustments, the bigger ones, right? The housing, transportation, and food situation. We have severely cut back on going out to eat. And yet we still do. Of course we do. And we enjoy it. But I will say this continues to be one of my favorite things about FI is like a constant, like it never gets old, is I enjoy going out to eat so much more because we go out to eat so much less.
Right. It's a treat.
It's
an actual treat as opposed to that's life.
Yes. And another adjustment we made is we invested in kitchen gear early on and stuff that we're going to have for life. Literally. I enjoy cooking. It's something I really enjoy.
I do not.
Taylor does not enjoy it.
Nice.
And I enjoy cooking for my family. Like not just for myself, but for my family. And so we invested in some good gear so we can make incredible meals at home. So our food game's actually risen leaps and bounds while we've saved incredible amounts of money by just making that small adjustment. Cars, we only have one vehicle. We've only had one vehicle since we went down to one vehicle in the middle of the movie. We're still continuing to make that work. And the reason why we were able to make that work is because we made sure that we had remote jobs and that we lived in a town where we could get around very easily with a bicycle. And like, that's something that a lot of people can do if they're willing to go as far as we did. I mean, we did a full readjustment of our life. So that worked out. And that was an intentional choice that we made and an adjustment that we made early on. And that has paid off in leaps and bounds. You know, we have to insure one vehicle. We have to put gas in one vehicle. Hopefully one day
we have no car payments.
Just plug it in.
We used to have 2 car payments.
Yeah. And, you know, that's been huge for us. The amount of savings, you know, over the long term is incredible. And then with housing as well, obviously we slashed our budget like crazy and we're able to purchase a house at the same time. And then of course we couldn't have seen this coming, but we did choose to live in a place where this was a stat that I found early on when we were looking to relocate, that Bend was, when we moved here in 2017, it was the remote working capital of the country per capita.
And that's 2017.
That's 2017. And that told me that people that have already gone remote have chosen to live here, which is a really good indicator that it's a good place to live.
Right. If you can live anywhere. It's a
desirable place to live. Yeah. If you can move anywhere, where would you move? Well, a lot of people said Bend. And of course, we couldn't have seen the pandemic coming and this insane adjustment in such an insane amount of time that, you know, remote work has gone bananas, which is incredible for people pursuing FI or even looking at it now, because it makes that so much easier. But it also, obviously, thank goodness we got in the housing market when we did. And then, you know, and then the rates were advantageous. And like all of a sudden, real estate was a massive part of our portfolio. And like this FI thing happened, it was just crazy, the timing, and we feel incredibly grateful. But those adjustments allowed for that to happen. You know, it's like luck is the intersection of hard work and preparation, right? And like that's exactly what happened. We did a lot of hard work and we prepared, and then we got lucky. And you know, that's kind of, I think, how we look at it. And so with those adjustments, which looking back don't feel that drastic or difficult, like we've enjoyed our time here, and you know, there's just been a few times where like one car gets in the way and we get kind of annoyed by it, and it's like uncomfortable or something or inconvenient. But in general, you know, it has not been an issue at all. And we have an amazing community. And because we live next door, like if I really need a car, I can just borrow my buddy's car for a minute, you know, and like it's just not that big of a deal. And they don't mind. And I wouldn't mind if they borrow mine. And like that happens all the time. And we do tool shares, and you know, we're constantly helping each other out with things to make our lives easier, to save money, whether it's saving money or not, saving time, whatever resource we can give. You know, it's just, I don't know, that's the spice of life. We all just moved into this new neighborhood. And so everybody's adjusting things and, you know, changing their landscaping and all this stuff. And like, I love getting dirty. I love getting out there with a shovel. So I'm always like, hey, if you're going to be doing some stuff, why don't you give me a call? Cause I'd love to come help you. And like, you know, at first I think people were like, nah, you know, I want to stay friends, you know, but I'm like, no, we're not going to be friends if I find out you're doing yard work without me.
And you didn't invite me. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. Then I want to hear more about this. So Taylor, you talked before about the housing situation, obviously. And it sounds like, so in the movie, for people who've seen the Playing with Fire documentary, at the very end, it looked like you bought this house. And I remember it being in a great location. I think the library was right across the street, if I remember correctly, or a park or some such. But yet it was a little noisy, which, you know, it made for some comedy on screen, obviously. Is that the home that you said you Airbnb'd, or do you guys still own that one?
Yeah. So great question. Since the movie, again, and I think to Scott's point, obviously interest rates and what happened in Bend is a little bit crazy. But when we bought that house, we were super crunching and saved because we knew we wanted to buy an Airbnb after that. So it took us 2 years, and then we bought the Airbnb after that first house. And then our plan was to keep the house that you saw in the movie and use that as a long-term rental. Well, COVID hit, and it was a little bit of a stressful time, right? And we ended up selling the first house because we had already moved into the Airbnb. And of course, we sold it 2 months before everything doubled.
Yeah. And remember,
darn it.
There's a couple details here that I think are pertinent. One is, do you remember like when COVID first was being reported? I think it was in December. And I remember like South by Southwest was going to happen. And there were multiple people that were involved with that saying like, I don't think this should take place. I think we should cancel this.
I think Tim Ferriss strongly amongst them, right?
Exactly. That's how I heard about it. Like, it was preposterous to a lot of people to even consider that, right? Because we've never gone through something like this before. And, I don't know, for us, like I was coming home and I was manic. I was like, Taylor, I think this is going to change our life. And I don't think people realize that. And at that moment, we were looking at it and we had just bought this new house. And so
the Airbnb.
Yeah. So our emergency fund, our savings was wiped, right?
Oh.
I mean, which was part of the plan. It's like, okay, these are the risks, right? We're going to save up. We're going to get this opportunity. Okay, great. We're going to be light on cash for a little bit. But because of our FI lifestyle, we know that, let's say 4 to 6 months down the road, we'll be back to some equilibrium where we've got some buffer. And right when that happens, this all happens. And it's like, we're staring down the barrel of a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. And, sorry, but put pen to paper at that moment. Let's sell our house now if we can, because God knows what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so in hindsight, of course, should have held on to that. That would have really, really made a huge impact in our FI journey. But like you said earlier, this is a curvy road and you never know what's going to happen. And like, some of this stuff with assets, you're going to take some risks. And we've already decided that we're willing to accept that. And so I will not lie to you. There were definitely months where I just sat there sort of watching I think it was like Redfin or Zillow updates where it's like, hey, your house is
go up and up and up.
It's now worth this. And you're like, that's not my house anymore, you jerk email. Unsubscribe. But the masochist in me is like, but I'm not going to unsubscribe because I want to know what's, I keep wanting to know kind of,
I hear you, man. This is one of those things. I think this is one of the biggest like levels up that people can have in their thinking. And we were originally introduced to this by Annie Duke, the poker player, right?
Yeah.
So in her unbelievably good book, Thinking in Bets, she talks about the concept of resulting, right? So it's looking at the result of a decision and then kind of looking backwards and saying, was that a good or bad decision just merely based on the result? Whereas like, that's a terrible way to look at it because decisions are made with the information you have at the time. And as you were saying in this case, okay, the world is coming unglued. I have no idea what's going to happen. Like you said before, I didn't know, I didn't trust. Has the math changed, right? Like this is March of 2020 when we know nothing, right? We know absolutely nothing.
And I'm working on commission, remind you, Brad.
Goodness. Right. So like best laid plans.
Yeah. And I've got a movie about money that may not have any applicability to this new world.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Ooh.
And we just bought a house and now we have, So again, you had best laid plans of, hey, do we have a long-term rental? Do we have an Airbnb? Do we have a third place that we live in? That sounds great. But then reality hits in March of 2020. And like, it's okay. I mean, I think this is so important is we are human beings. It's okay to feel what we feel. And I think I know that sounds kind of elementary, almost like a resulting type thing, but like, it's okay to feel nervous.
Totally.
Or feel uncertain. Or not have any idea what's going to happen.
Or feel like you want to throw up when that first house gets listed for double what we bought it for. Just to let you know.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Oh, goodness.
But I will say, we spent the 2 years in the Airbnb that we weren't planning on living in. And we spent it fixing it up. And we spent COVID really making that Airbnb such a cool spot. And honestly, it felt like home by the time we left. I was sad to leave it by the time we left it. And, we could have never planned for any of that. And I think that, again, brought us closer in so many ways, being able to put our blood, sweat, and tears into a house that now is a fruitful asset for us and will continue to be really for the foreseeable future.
That's a big part of our retirement plan, essentially, right? And so, it ended up working out. It's okay. Like, we took a sort of unrealized hit on that first house, but that's okay. Like, I'm almost grateful we did because it's good to go through some hurt. I think if everything constantly works out all the time, you can get, into that sort of like, I don't know what it's called, but let's just call it winner bias, where you just think every time something comes up, you're going to win. And it's probably good to get knocked down a peg or two. So I'm totally fine with it. We're fine with it now, and I don't know. I can't tell you, Brad. I mean, I think I told you this earlier, but I talked to Jonathan the other day as well. And I just thanked him profusely for everything he did for us. And I thank you too. I mean, it's just the gratitude that we have for you guys and, as being such an integral, unbelievable part of this journey for us. It's just been amazing. And I think a lot of the people in the ChooseFI community probably, and the FI community at large, probably feel similarly, which is just an insane debt of gratitude to you guys for being as excited as you've been and putting it out as long as you have, as much as you have, it's amazing. It's amazing watching this whole thing grow. I love you, man.
Don't make him cry.
Yeah, no, right back on you, buddy. Well, thank you. That's incredible. Yeah, I'm trying to find a way to respond without crying here, but
both of you, get it together.
Yeah.
Get it together. Do I need to take over the show here?
Sorry.
The Taylor show. No, I mean, listen, I appreciate it more than you can imagine. It's been, I mean, just what an amazing journey this has been for the whole community. And I think that's what's so cool about an evolution. And we've all had evolutions. The community has, your family has, our family has. And like, I find that like a wonderful, wonderful thing that it's just like, we're all learning together. And like, that's what's cool about having you guys on and say like, hey, listen, this hasn't been the easiest journey in the world. It wasn't like roses, unicorns, and rainbows, picking up and moving and doing this thing at the same time, like, or just pursuing FI or making change. Like, it's not always going to be easy. And that's okay. That's part of the journey. Like, even though my life is perfect on paper, like, I'm not sitting here again with unicorns and rainbows every day. Like, that's just not the human experience. It just isn't. But like, is this amazing directionally? Of course it is. It's remarkable.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. I think it's just really important.
I think the biggest thing I've taken away from all of this is just be intentional about your life. And I think intentional can be so many different things, but it's not just about money. It's so much more about happiness and where you want to be and where you want to be going. And choose to think intentionally on all things. If that's at work, if that's, in your personal life, just choose that path and your life becomes so much more yours.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I think also, Brad, one other thing I wanted to bring up is just like, I work in recruiting. And so I work on the job front so much right now. And I don't know if this is applicable to any of the listeners, but I feel like now is the time, if you're not working remote or you're not in a situation that you love, to be able to speak your mind and say your piece and talk to your managers and talk to your people that are making those rules, because I think there's a lot of flexibility in the workplace right now. And I think that it allows people to make their own decisions in their life, and kind of going back to creating your own community and creating your own schedule and making it work for your family. I just think there's a lot of opportunity right now out there.
That's wonderful. Let's dive into that just real quick, because I think this will be like that actionable tip that somebody could take. So you're in this world, you're in recruiting. It sounds like what you're saying is people have more leverage now than maybe they've ever had before, right?
100%.
So talk me through maybe why that's the case and how somebody could like actually manifest it in their actual lives, knowing that like it's nerve-wracking sometimes to ask these things, right?
Absolutely. Obviously there's a caveat of it's not for everyone. If you're a facilities worker, or a teacher, obviously like there's certain professions that just don't apply to this. But there are a lot of administrative professional positions that have a lot of flexibility. And over the last few years, we've seen that positions that you never thought could be like accounting or anything like that, most of those positions were really in the office. And now people have the ability, because there's such a shortage in workforce right now. And that's a huge convergence of so many things, right? I mean, so many baby boomers retiring. There's so many people that went to a one income family during COVID. And they're like, you know what? This works for our family. I'm not going back. So we've lost like this huge workforce in our country. And I feel like now is the time for people to say to their employer, hey, I value being an employee and I want to stay here. And here's what I need to be happy to stay. And I think that honestly, I know it's scary to go and say that, but also what's the worst case scenario? They're going to say no. Okay, then go back to your normal day job that you're doing anyway. So it doesn't really matter. I think just really manifesting the life that you want and saying to yourself, hey, I'm not saying I need to quit my job right now because that's not financially feasible for our family. But you know what? I'd love to be able to drop my kid off at school, or I'd love to be able to walk my kid to the bus stop. Being able to say things that are important to you and speaking up at work while you're still in it and while you're pursuing this journey, I think is a really big selling point for this world.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's like you said, it's this unusual convergence for so many factors, right?
Yeah.
That have led to this point where there are help wanted signs everywhere. You see them everywhere, and there are millions of jobs potentially. So again, what's the worst that happens? Yeah, it's hard to imagine. I mean, what is truly the worst that would happen is you get fired on the spot for asking for, I mean, like, do you really want to work at that company anyway? I mean, come on.
Totally.
And yeah, what's the likelihood that's actually going to happen, right? So yeah, I love that. And I think that's like another one of the themes that actually has surprised me with how much it's resonated with the FI community, with our ChooseFI community, is everything is negotiable.
Yes.
So that's a phrase, right? And it's like, that is so powerful as a mindset, like just like an operating system. Everything is negotiable and you never know unless you ask.
Yeah. And I think just like on the community front too, negotiable. I know for us, we were always those people that were overscheduled on all things. We would say yes to everything. We would go to all the events. We'd put our kid in all the activities. It was just so much. And then COVID happened and we all stopped all that. And we were like, wow, this is really nice to have a little extra time. And so being negotiable and having conversations about what's really important to you in your family for your week. If you don't want to go to 4 activities, don't go. Say no. You know?
Just say no to activities.
Just say no.
No.
Well, yeah. And say no to overscheduling. Like, it's funny. Our phrase in the Barrett household is, you can opt out.
Yes.
So you can opt out of this. Again, it's almost like a sleepwalking. It's like, okay, that's what suburban families do. We all strive. We all try to get our kids in the best schools. We try to, again, overschedule, and they have to be in our case, the best swim program and the best this. And it's like, you can actually opt out of that. Like, you don't have to play that game. Like, like another phrase I like is, what are you optimizing for?
Sure.
Right? Like, am I optimizing for my kid to be an Olympic swimmer? Like, no. I mean, sure, if she wanted to be, of course, I would support her to the ends of the earth, but like, she doesn't really want to be. So like, therefore, what are we optimizing for? We're optimizing for her enjoying swimming still, as opposed to hating every second of it at this, top 5 club in America that's right around the corner,
And also, I think we talk a lot about, our friends. And when we made all these like huge adjustments in the beginning, Scott was like, how many people have you lost, that really just said, gosh, Taylor isn't driving that BMW anymore. I don't like her. Like, how many people really care when you think you're doing it for everyone else, or like you're doing it for some image, when in reality, no one really cares, because everyone's always worried about themselves. So they don't care if you didn't go to the birthday party. They don't care if you didn't go to the club activity. Like, who cares? Nobody.
Nobody. Yeah, nobody is paying attention to you anywhere near as much. It's funny. That's another lesson. We're hitting on all these phrases I use in my house. Is like, everybody is the star of their own movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Think about that. And it sounds negative when you say it at first, but it's not at all. It's actually super liberating. Everybody's the star of their own movie. You were just an extra in their movie. And, it's funny talking to you guys, movie creators, obviously, but like,
quite literally. Yes, we are. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
But right, like, that's actually, again, it's not to say that nobody cares about you. Everybody's callous and awful and self-centered. Like, I don't mean like that, because I genuinely think it's a wonderful world on the whole. People are great, et cetera, et cetera. But what it means is, like, I think back to when I was a kid and I was like embarrassed by like every, like, oh, I did this thing wrong. Like, everybody's going to laugh at me. Like, I had that, I think, even more than most people did. And like, nobody cares. Nobody cares, because they're not thinking about you. They're worried about themselves and like them embarrassing their own selves. There's something ridiculous. Like, we have these scripts running in our heads. And like, again, you can opt out. You can opt out of all of this. It's just beautiful. And I think like, that's what I try to get across to my girls, is like, you can live your own lives.
Yeah, it's a little bit like, it kind of reminds me of like the idea of like the difference between frugal and cheap, right? Like, cheap is when it affects others, and like frugality is when it's just you making your own decisions, essentially. Right, and I feel like it's the same thing with like self-absorption, or like only caring about yourself, however you want to phrase that. It really is only a problem when it negatively affects others. It's not necessarily a bad thing to be selfish. If it's going to improve your situation or your life or your livelihood or your outlook, that's only going to help other people, through osmosis. So like, it's kind of like similarly, right? Like, as long as you're thoughtful and caring about others, feel free to be as selfish and self-absorbed as you need to be for yourself, right? Like,
no, that's so interesting. And it's funny, because that actually ties into like one other thing that I really wanted to talk to you guys about is the intentionality around others, right? Around this community that you've built, because I think so many people really strive and long for that community, and both having 5 people around, but really maybe, more important. And sure, like, your friends who are on your block, they might not be pursuing FI, and that's fine. But like you said, you have tool sharing, and if you needed to borrow your friend's car, like, the proverbial, like, I'm out of eggs, can I borrow eggs and sugar or something, like the 1950s, right? But how did you actually do that? Because it sounds great on paper. Okay. I would love to live on the same block as 5 different friends of mine, but like, how did you guys actually make that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, first of all, like, we literally are living in the 50s or whatever, like that whole idea. Like, we really need a dinner bell at this point because the kids are all running out in the street. We don't know where they went, but we literally know everybody on the street at this point. So it's really, we don't have a prescription for you as far as how this went. It was really the stars aligning on a lot of fronts. I think, one, we had an amazing crew of friends that we literally we potted up. We survived COVID with them. They all have similar age kids. Like, a lot of that, I think boils down to, we chose to move to a place where, turns out, a lot of other people were thinking very similarly to us, right? A lot of people were saying, I'm ready to, sort of take a break from that hamster wheel. I want to get out of traffic. I want to go to a place that's smaller, more community oriented, all these things. That's what we felt. Well, it turns out when we move here, you find a bunch of people where that's the value. That's what they value, right? Because that's what we have here.
And I think that's a line in how to, create this, is find people that align with the values that you align with. And I think that's a big one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just feel like it was easier for us to find that here because we were surrounded by people that, turns out, like, valued similar things, like being outdoors and being with family and putting work second and all these things. So it became sort of easy to connect with people because you had a lot of common ground to start off from. From there, I mean, we were just so fortunate that we found some amazing friends who we care about and who care about us, that have similar age kids, and those kids have got along really well. So we were able to sort of, like I said, survive together through the crisis. And then coming out the other side, we realized, wow, like, we just went through a lot together in very close quarters, and we're still friends. We still love each other. So that's pretty amazing. And one thing led to another, and we all kind of moved here at similar times. So we're all kind of in the a very similar timeline from a housing standpoint, just like you buy it and then 2 years later you can get another loan kind of situation where you're not paying capital gains, all that kind of stuff. And so it just kind of all worked out where everybody was kind of had the opportunity to make this happen. And this new neighborhood was going in, and it kind of fit the bill for everyone. And it was like, hey guys, this is actually possible. Like, I know we always joke about having a little commune and, going out and buying a big acreage and putting a bunch of houses on it, all living together, because that'd be a lot easier and blah, blah, blah. But like, we can actually do that, only it's like on a public street, with utilities and stuff, and like other people around too. And do you guys, I don't know, you should be consider it. And just one thing led to another. And it was like, wow, this is actually happening. It's incredible. And then turns out a couple other friends that we've known, even a couple from Coronado who we knew in Coronado or were connected to through mutual friends in Coronado, also moved on the street. It's pretty wild. A guy I used to work with 10 years ago when I was living in San Diego and he was living in Santa Cruz now lives 2 doors down. I've known him for over a decade. That's our joke on the street. It's like, oh, y'all are friends. That's good. Craig and I have known each other for over a decade. But it's just, it's cute. Really a stars align kind of thing. It's pretty crazy. But I would say, again, it just comes back to that sort of, we feel so lucky that happened, but what is luck, right? It's the intersection of preparation and hard work. And I just think that kind of applies here too, to some extent. And I don't know.
I think the other thing is, again, back to the intentional feeling of when we moved here, we met so many people, and sometimes you do the niceties of we're going to be friends. We're going to be acquaintances. We just chose to not spend an exorbitant amount of time with people that didn't fill us up, and, have a friendship that really was developing both sides, that didn't serve each other. We didn't spend our time with people that didn't add that value to our life. And I think people might look at that as oh, you have a very not as many friends, but our friendships that we do have are so robust and loving that it just really fills us up in so many ways and doesn't spread us too thin.
Yeah, we had gotten into that trap for sure. Where I think our natural state is to be nice to other people, of course, and to be open and curious and all those things. And because that is our natural state, I think, we don't have a hard time meeting people. And so when we moved here, we definitely we had actually said it out loud to ourselves, we're going to be intentional about what kind of friends we end up making. In other words, like Taylor just said, this has to be two-sided. It has to be people we want to spend our time with. And I think that was really a factor of really understanding that time is our most valuable resource, which is a huge tenet of all of this, right? And so when we looked at it through that lens, we just weren't willing to give up that time for people that we didn't feel great about or whatever. And it's like, it's almost like dating to some extent, right? Like when you know, and it doesn't take that long to figure that out, and you don't have to like keep it running for years on end as an experiment just to see if it might work out. Like we just didn't feel the need to do that. So I think you're right. Like we put on a bigger filter than we normally would have, and it actually served us. And it's not to say like go out and cancel half your friends, guys, like, put them to the test, have them fill out a form, nothing like that. But that was also a function of moving to a new place. Growing up a Navy brat, I've moved, I don't know, at this point, over 20 times in my life. And, there's an obvious reset that happens when you do that. And I have a mountain of friends that, I've met through the years in different places all over the country. And I'm grateful for all of them. And they're a wonderful part of my life. So, hey, just because you move away from somewhere doesn't mean you lose your friends. You won't see them as often, and that's sad. But there's obviously going to be an opportunity to meet new friends and build a new community if you do choose to move. And we did choose to move, and we did choose to build that new community. And yeah, I would say this time around, it was just a lot more intentional. And I think that's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think again, that word intentional, right? Intentionality, I think that is like a big running theme of this entire episode. And yeah, very specifically with friends, like, yeah, I think it's it when you see it. Like you said, Scott, like it's almost like when you're dating somebody, you can tell the difference between something that's long-term and has potential and doesn't, right? And it's like, to me, it's like the reciprocal nature of it. I think it's so easy to find people that you're kind of acquaintances with, or like you might invite them over and then you never hear back. They don't invite you places. It's like, okay, that's very, very different from someone who's like genuinely looking forward to hanging out with you. And I know that's like a subtle thing, but again, you know it when you see it. And I think it's important to cultivate the people that are around you and find people that you're in alignment with, right? Like we have all of these themes. I mean, intentionality, alignment, community, making adjustments. This runs through your entire lives. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think that really typifies beautifully the path to FI. So I think it's amazing. So guys, this is wild. 5.5 years you've been on this journey. And obviously I've loved getting to know you. The entire community has loved getting to know you through the Playing with Fire documentary, your book, obviously your website, playingwithfire.co is a nice, easy way that people can get links to. It's a beautiful website, by the way. I'm like incredibly jealous.
Thank you.
Absolutely gorgeous website. Everybody can find all the links to everything you're involved in there. But is there another way people should get in touch, or is that generally the best?
That's generally the best. Yeah, you hit it nail on the head. Thank you, bud. Appreciate it.
Okay, so playingwithfire.co. All right, Scott and Taylor Rieckens, thank you so much, my friends. It's great to talk to you. Great to catch up. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Brad. It's been awesome.
So good to see you.
We miss you, buddy.
Yeah, right back at you.